Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
Does your warehouse waste time and money managing forklift batteries? EnerSys can energize your operations with a customized solution, delivering the power you need while minimizing ownership costs. EnerSys starts by analyzing your operations and then selecting from their comprehensive range of battery and charger technologies, develops a truly optimized system tailored to your needs. EnerSys gives you the power to increase productivity and profitability. See how EnerSys puts power in motion for you at enersys.com. With e-commerce off the charts, many small and growing warehouses are asking, how can I get ahead when my warehouse is barely keeping up? The answer is future-ready warehouse tech from Zebra Technologies. Warehouses can simplify and upgrade all processes, from automated inventory management to hands-free picking, with Zebra's tailored, scalable mobile solutions. They're simple and intuitive. There's never been a better time to upgrade for success with Zebra. How can your warehouse get ahead? The answer's in black and white. Get the answers at zebra.com/theanswer. That's zebra.com/theanswer. Businesses are retooling fulfillment operations, from warehouses to omnichannel, to meet new demand amid unprecedented labor shortages. 3PLs, retailers, B2B distributors, and others are turning to flexible fulfillment solutions like 6 River Systems to adapt and scale. 6 River Systems Fulfillment Execution System is an integrated solution that combines intelligent, cloud-based software and automation, including its autonomous mobile robot, AMR, Chuck. No costly or disruptive infrastructure changes, fast and easy associate training, and integrations with other warehouse execution solutions allow operations to meet labor challenges, increase efficiency, and enhance customer engagement. Go to www.6river.com to learn more. Go to www.6river.com to learn more.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by Jana Gerber, who is the North America Microgrid President at Schneider Electric. And microgrid, what is that? We're going to talk about that today, and we're going to talk a little bit about sustainability and holistic sustainability too as well. In a general sense, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into a detailed discussion on how that pertains to the warehousing, distribution center, fulfillment type of category, which we are focused on this podcast. So very interested to hear about this topic and do some learning as well, because I can't say I'm totally familiar with some of these terms. So it'd be very interesting to talk to Jana today. I'm going to welcome her to the show. So Jana, how are you today?
Very well, Kevin. Thank you for having me here today. Appreciate being on this podcast with you.
Definitely happy to have you on. Happy to talk about this topic. I think it's pretty interesting and a little different from some of the things we've talked about on the podcast in the past. But before we kind of get into it, why don't you give us a little background on what it is you do and what Schneider Electric does?
So I have been with Schneider Electric for 20 years. I started as a structural engineer or civil engineer, and really intrigued by the built environment and what that looked like and how people interacted with that. So I started building buildings and helping to make them stand up due to earthquakes, wind, et cetera, and then said, well, I know how they stand up. Now let's figure out how they work from the inside out and understand better the electrical mechanical system. So I joined a company that did mechanical electrical consulting engineering. And then we were ultimately acquired by Schneider Electric in 2005 as we did this other little crazy thing called performance contracting that helps public customers find value and holistic solutions for their buildings as well. So that was kind of my entry point into Schneider. And since then, I've been in multiple different roles, really focused around what I'll call my North Star of segments and end user focus. So making sure that we're delivering a holistic solution to our customers and helping them find the value that will help their business grow.
Very interesting, and obviously a long journey there on doing everything, like as you said, from the outside of making buildings stand up and then into the inside of buildings and figuring out the inner workings there as well, which obviously there's a lot of complexity going on in those different topics, and a lot of responsibility as well. You said you're responsible for making buildings not fall over in an earthquake, right? So that's a lot of weight there to have on your shoulders. So very interesting stuff. And now you are North America microgrid president, right? So we're going to dive into that microgrid term in a little bit. But I think the right setup here is why don't we discuss a little bit first kind of where we are in terms of the sustainability journey, I guess we'll call it, in the warehousing fulfillment world.
Perfect. Yeah, so sustainability is a term that's been around for decades. And for Schneider Electric, we describe it as being part of our true DNA in the side of the company. It's something that we have that makes people excited to come to Schneider and be a part of the business. And it really is a piece that fuels our growth and where we're going. So when we think about sustainability inside of Schneider, and this will help us talk about what it means in the industry,
Sure.
We think about it in really kind of two different lenses. The first is really around how we ourselves want to lead in the ecosystem. So helping ourselves be seen as leaders in how we approach sustainability. Another term that's often intertwined with sustainability is, it's not really a word. It's a bunch of words combined into ESG. So environmental, social, and governance. And so we measure and track metrics around these three different elements that help us to be more inclusive, more equitable, more concerned about the climate and where we're going. So that's really kind of Schneider's leadership. And then when we think about that, we also think about then how do we translate that into how we help our customers. So the other lens is that sustainability solutions for our customers to help them really understand where they are, like you said, on their sustainability journey, and then how to help them find how and where they want to advance. So not every company is going to wake up tomorrow and be, on their advanced sustainability journey, but we want to help them progress along that path. And so for Schneider, we think about it in really kind of three different areas. One around helping them strategize. So thinking about what do they want to be when they grow up in sustainability? How far along that path do they want to go? And even thinking about it in terms and under the lens of their competition. So, this competitor is going to be carbon neutral or net zero by 2030, 2040, 2050. Where is it that they want to be? And what does that do to their business strategy? So the first is, again, that strategy piece, helping them set the vision of where they want to go. The second is around digitization. So helping them really think through how to digitize all that data so that they can make sure that they're measuring and understanding where they are on that journey. And then the third piece is really around decarbonization. And so inside of Schneider, we think about decarbonization in four levers. The first is around electrifying. The second being around reducing. So making sure every electron is used in the best possible way and the most efficient possible way. And then the third way is around redefinition or redefining. So making sure that we are helping our customers think about how to change from fossil fuels to other energy sources, decarbonated energy sources. And then the final lever of decarbonization is really around engagement. So thinking about their business strategy, circular economy, and then also that scope 3, which is really upstream and downstream of them. So it could be things around who are they buying their materials from? So their supply chain. It could be work travel. It could be a lot of different things, but that supply chain typically makes up a very large piece of their emissions inside of their operations.
Very interesting. And I think, there's a lot of things going on there, I would say. Right? So
it was a lot. I said a lot.
So the sustainability in its sense is, I think that, there's the realization that this needs to happen, and companies need to be more aware of, how you said it, putting out more carbon and what they're doing to the environment that they're present in, and the environment that their customers are present in as well. So it's great that you guys have broken it down into these different segments and kind of almost, you said levers there. It's almost like steps on the journey in a sense. So it's really great that you guys are addressing that, I think, internally, and then trying to reflect that on others externally as well by helping your customers and giving them that enablement to be able to start to do these different things and bring them to a better standpoint, not just for their company, but for those that are involved with them and those that are around them, maybe even people that are not their customers, but are in the same community as them, right? So it's a very big topic, I think, and it's still something that I think is very early, I guess, and fresh in a sense. There's still a lot to be undertaken when we think about in the grand scope of sustainability.
Yeah. So Kevin, you bring up some really good points around kind of, the thought around sustainability and where, society is on our journey of around sustainability. And, sustainability is what we're seeing is that it helps organizations deliver better results for not only their stakeholders, their shareholders, including their employees and the communities. So if you really think about the last few years for all of us, it's been around this global pandemic, right? And so when we think about that and think about what could be the next global pandemic beyond another, virus and outbreak, is really around climate change. And so climate change, is no longer a remote possibility. It's to take a quote from a movie, it's a clear and present danger, right? It's something that now businesses, industries, and companies are all thinking about. It's, a few years ago, the CEO of BlackRock talked about, he puts out a letter every year to all the different CEOs of different companies. And he pretty much said, if you're not addressing climate change in your business strategies, you are an investment risk. And so that's a big statement to state. Not only do you have that, but then you also have, obviously, the government and pushes around different policy and legislation driving towards better elements around climate change. And then the most recent being the SEC saying that full disclosure of all your emissions as an organization is a real thing and it's coming. So start preparing yourself. So I think there's, like I said, it's no longer a clear and present danger. It is top of mind of business, government, and society as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you said, that telling companies that if they're not thinking about this, they're an investment risk is a big statement, like you said there. But I think as we've, been talking about here, I mean, it's such an important thing. And like we see, climate change is, it's happening, right? We see the things that are happening around the world, and, it's pretty remarkable to see, and it's dramatic to see some of the things as well. I think I saw a video the other day, actually, where because of, ice melting, there was a bridge that just washed out because of the excess water that was being flooded into this river. And it's pretty crazy to think about. So it's certainly something, as you said, needs to be addressed by companies. And I think, as we, maybe sometimes wait for a government push or something like that to do this, as you mentioned, the SEC has already kind of put it out there that this will be something that they're going to be checking on. But we still need to be able to move towards where companies are looking at themselves internally and being able to address this, right? And I think one way to do this is potentially through microgrids, right? So tell us exactly what is a microgrid, and how do companies kind of move towards a microgrid, and why would they want to do that?
Yeah.
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
So as a few minutes ago, we talked about the decarbonization levers of, electrify, reduce, redefine, and engage. But let's really just stick to the top three, which are focused around your scope 1 and scope 2 elements of a company. And that's really inside of the four walls of an organization. So when you think about electrification, reduction, and redefinition to fossil fuel free solutions, a microgrid really fits inside of all three of those different elements. And so when you think, I'll just pull up quickly, there's a Department of Energy, and their definition talks about local electrical distribution network with distributed energy resources, or often called DERs, that provide generation, storage, and flexible loads interconnected and coordinated by an intelligent management system. So really what it means is that a microgrid is not, we have our large power grid across the US managed by different utilities and providers, but a microgrid really provides that decentralized, digitized, and decarbonated alternative for on-site management of their power. So it helps you to manage cost. It helps you with your sustainability goals. And one of the big things that it really helps with is around resiliency. So you think about, a lot of people, I think, install solar on their homes, and they think, well, if the grid goes down, I'll still have my solar array on the roof.
Right.
But once the grid goes down, that solar array no longer produces energy because doesn't have a base load that it's connected to. So what a microgrid does is really kind of switch the power, where the power is coming from, which originally and most of the time can be from the grid. And then you can also switch it to an islanded mode, which allows that whole system to operate without the grid. And that's really that kind of resilient solution. So we've heard a lot about, the wildfires on the West Coast.
Right.
I live in Dallas, Texas, and recently we had Snowmageddon, as they called it, last February, where when that went down, it allows for people to have access to energy when the grid is not able to produce it. So that resiliency for certain businesses and certain individuals can be a very strong motivator around a microgrid.
Very interesting. And I think it's interesting that you pointed out that, people will put solar on their house and think that they're good, but technically, no, is what you're saying. And I think that makes sense because you're still tied into the grid. But when we're moving towards this microgrid concept, essentially you're not being reliant on the overall grid as a whole. Is that correct? Am I getting that right?
Yeah. So you can interact with the grid when it is up and available. So let's say during the day you're collecting a lot of solar power. You get to a point in the day where it's a super high point, and now you're pulling more from solar. So you can start to even leverage energy storage or battery systems that might have collected the night before that are now discharging to help to keep your loads below the peak of where you might go. So for a lot of operations as well, that peak load can be a real cost inhibitor. So a lot of times your utility costs of a company are based on that peak consumption billing charge. So it can help you to manage that and help you to lower that curve so you're better optimizing your overall cost as well that you're paying out in utility charges.
So, I mean, obviously, it's a way, and I think you touched on it there. You said, it's a very good part of being resilient. And I think, when we look at this and start to understand the definition of microgrid, you can see the resiliency there because you're balancing where you're getting your energy source from, but you're not dependent on one type, if I think I'm understanding correctly. So you have this flexibility and you can exist on your own as your own entity essentially and still operate what you need to do. So give us an example, I guess, for our listeners, and we're the New Warehouse podcast here. So if we had a distribution center, fulfillment center, and we wanted to move towards this microgrid concept, how would we do something like that?
Yeah, so first, it's really understanding what your load requirements are inside of that site. Okay. So the good news with distribution and warehouse is you typically have a lot of space on your roofs, right? So you have a lot of area where you can put microgrids. Again, you have to kind of consider the age of the roof and all those kind of things and what's the cost to upgrade your roof if you need to, but that's beside the point. So first is finding the right partner, I think, in a lot of ways to help you understand, your roof life, look at the utility costs, look at your load profile, and understand how can this really create a monetized solution for your business and help you not only look at, again, manage your resiliency, your sustainability levers, but also your cost. And it can add a lot of cost predictability for companies, which can also create a lot of value for them. So now, instead of really being managed by, these ups and downs of the utility cost, you are able to better predict your long-term cost. And there's another thing that Schneider has done in the last few years, and we've been a first in really helping to create this energy as a service solution. So what that means is really, instead of focusing on all the little costs of, the solar array, the battery, the technology and the software, but now you just focus on, I want, this outcome for my warehouse. I want my energy to be provided at this cost. I want my uptime to be available at this. And companies will actually finance that and take it from a capital cost and translate it into an operating cost for their customers. So it can be a very cost-effective way for customers and warehouses and logistics centers to really look at this as a solution. Very interesting.
And I mean, it sounds like it can be something that's fairly feasible for the majority of warehouses and distribution centers. I'm curious if you have seen, I know I'm here in New Jersey, and we have these kind of pockets here in New Jersey where, there's tons of distribution centers and fulfillment centers like in the same area. So have you seen any projects where these fulfillment centers, distribution centers, even though maybe different companies have kind of teamed up and built a microgrid to help all of their facilities together in the same area?
Yeah, so microgrids really work and pencil well from a financial perspective and that cost predictability, especially in some of the areas on the coastlines, right? So New York, New Jersey, California, Washington, Oregon, et cetera. So those coasts really create the cost of energy is high. And I'll take Washington and Oregon out for the concept of the conversation. Yeah. The cost of energy is high. The mix of the grid is sometimes doesn't incorporate as many renewables. So it provides a really good area for those to be able to put this type of a solution in place. So as far as different logistic and warehouses, we're looking at that for sure as far as logistics and warehouses. And there's some that are out there, and a very large company that's really leading the way in solar adoption, but then figuring out how then to also incorporate some of these other areas of energy storage and making them more resilient for the future, or I'll say future ready. So the other thing that warehouses have to think about is not only their current usage, but you think about now all of these different forklifts and things inside of their sites, and the plant optimization elements that could be being leveraged inside of those sites that are now becoming electrified. So now your electrification requirements go up as well, making it even more feasible for microgrids to be a solution to start to augment what they're buying from the grid and what then they're producing also on site. So it's a very interesting kind of mix right now of these becoming more feasible for more of a variety of building types.
I can definitely attest to high energy costs here in New Jersey. It's insane. And so it's good to know that potentially I could be in a microgrid mecca here, right? So it's ripe for microgrid. So hopefully we'll see more come in and be able to alleviate some of those costs and be more sustainable as a whole for the state as well. I mean, in that sense, we look at sustainability, and obviously, I think the word sustainability in general is a big word. There's a lot encompassing in that, I think, as we've kind of unpacked a little bit in our discussion here. But there's this other term kind of added on to sustainability, and you mentioned a holistic approach kind of in the beginning of our conversation here. So there's holistic sustainability. So talk to us a little bit about that and how Schneider is kind of taking this holistic sustainability approach.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about that. Strategize, digitize, and decarbonize, right? And so one of the things that's really interesting for Schneider when we think about this holistic sustainability approach is not just the elements we can provide from our, consulting teams, helping customers think about what it means to be net zero in their operations. And not only the microgrid element of what Schneider does, but now think about some of the broader solutions and broader elements that can be brought to bear to help a customer. So, whether that be better control of their sites, better control of their industrial automation, better control of better visibility of their actual energy usage through metering systems on site and sensors that are installed inside of their buildings or facilities. So I think there's that holistic concept is really not just thinking about it from the strategy elements, but now also the actions that can help a customer think about how to start to take action and move their emissions down inside and further towards their goals of what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, very interesting. And I think it's really interesting, I think, the way that you break it down in a sense, because, I think there is this whole discussion of the strategy, as you mentioned, right? What's our strategy? What's the plan? This and that. But I think it's those actionable steps that really make us move forward and help us to evolve and adapt to, what we need to adapt to in order to be more sustainable and be better for the environment. So the fact that you kind of laid out there how you're able to give these actionable steps and really kind of map out the journey in that sense and be able to help companies see a better way to go about this and really how to start, I think, because it is such a large mountain to climb, I think, to get to where you need to be. And especially for a lot of companies who really haven't, taken those first steps necessarily. Maybe, they recycle paper in the office and that's about it, right? So, you kind of need some guidance on how to do this. So I think it's great that you guys are able to give that through your consulting arm and being able to do that. So, I mean, with that being said, we have a lot of companies that are, potentially listening and realizing they need to do something internally and get started on this journey. So what would you say, I guess, from your perspective or Schneider's perspective, how does a company actually get started on this journey and what do they need to do first?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really understanding first how it ties to their business strategy and where they want to go, right? So sustainability is not just a cost. Yeah. It can be a true differentiator for their business and for their sites and facilities. So, the one thing that I didn't mention earlier, we didn't talk about, I didn't bring up when we were talking about trends, is that now a lot of these larger companies, right, are thinking about they're starting to get through understanding their scope 1 and scope 2, so the things inside of their 4 walls, but now they're starting to really think concretely about how do they manage their supply chain, and that's scope 3. Even Schneider Electric, as you think about it, a lot of our sites are leased and leasing them from different companies. And so we're saying that for our supply, that we need for our supply chain, we need them to be being more green and decarbonizing. So we're asking, our landlords to think about this differently as well. And so with that, it's putting another layer of pressure on warehouse and logistics sites as they're thinking about where they're going. So this concept of on-site renewables, thinking about their broader sustainability portfolio, comes from multiple angles now moving forward. And so I think it can also become very much a differentiator, as well as they're looking to attract some of these larger companies to use and lease their spaces. If they're more green, where those larger companies are more likely also to rent those spaces.
Very interesting. And I think that it's interesting that you're pointing out that you're kind of almost pushing back on your suppliers, and you mentioned your example, the landlords themselves. And I'm curious, in a sense, if your company is thinking about, getting more sustainable and going down this route, and they're reaching out to their suppliers and telling them that, they want to do this, and their expectations are now at this level. What if the supplier or the landlord in your example is like not in that same mindset? Like they're not getting to the point where they're like thinking about doing this sustainability journey. I mean, how do you recommend a company or operation would kind of deal with that kind of headbutt there a little bit?
Yeah, so it's really, there's one way, right, to really understand the complexities of the leasing structure and how it's being put in place, and deciding, is there a way, and is it cost effective for us as the occupant of that space to make some modifications to the building, if we can, to make it better aligned in where we want to go. But if you think about, Schneider Electric this last year, we have, our different goals around being carbon neutral in our scope 1, scope 2 in 2025, net zero by 2030. And then we're looking at our entire scope 1 and scope 2 and scope 3 by 2040, and then also by 2050 being net zero. So this last year, we actually launched our zero carbon project as kind of an intermediate step of that broader scope 3 element, saying that, we're going to focus on our top 1,000 suppliers. And so it's kind of the 80-20 rule, right? Saying, let's focus on those top 1,000 suppliers, because they are causing, through our partnerships, a very large portion of our scope 3. And so if we focus there, then we'll, drive it down. So our goal with them is to reduce their emissions by 50%, I believe, by 2030. And so by doing that, going back to your initial question, if one of our landlords is maybe, or I'm just using us as an example, any company that has these different goals, if their landlord is one of the major pieces of that puzzle for them, and they can't get to those goals, do they go somewhere else? And that becomes a very big business decision to decide, okay, so we've been happy with them financially, or, things have been going well, but as we think about our sustainability goals, and so this is again where it comes into a question of competitiveness for companies, right? Like it's no longer just a financial competitiveness of being the right lease rate and cost for a company, but now that sustainability element does really come into play, and it becomes a critical driver as companies are really trying to achieve their goals and help to meet their commitments around sustainability.
Interesting points, because I think it's, you kind of said there in the end, kind of wrapping it up, it's like you're basically, the market itself is going to be demanding this as customers, and I think it's gonna push the suppliers to realize that they're gonna have to step up and do the right thing, and be able to meet these sustainability standards that companies are going to be putting out there, or they're going to be, dropping from the top 1,000, I guess, in your example, to, the bottom 5 or something like that, right? So, you gotta be able to adapt and evolve, I think, overall in the entire ecosystem that, is our supply chain and all the different aspects of that. And I think it's very interesting to talk about this topic, because there's so much going on, and there's so much to understand and be able to continue to move forward and start as a company and be able to bring these things to light. So I'm curious, before we wrap up here, let's take it back to the kind of listener level. We've been talking very much about, companies and how they can start on their sustainability journey. But what would you say is kind of your number one thing that you would share with an individual on how they can make the best impact from a sustainability standpoint, or from environmental impact, whether it's in their personal life or internally in their company?
Yeah, I think it's just about awareness on both, right? Making some of those different choices along the way for yourself, and helping others to see the choices that they're making as well in an organization. So really understanding what it is, and as you go think about, what you're having for dinner even, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we think that red meat isn't always awesome from a health perspective, but it's also not the best if you look at it from a sustainability issue. And I actually sleep a lot better sometimes when I choose a fish over a steak at dinner. So, making little choices like that, to recycling and things we've talked about already, to the types of cars and choices we're making, in the type of energy and the amount of energy we're using ourselves personally. They're tough, right? And they're tough decisions, and none of us are perfect at them yet. But I think as technology really gets there, those options become more feasible for all of us as well. So going out and buying an electric vehicle right now is a little challenging with the market and amount of vehicles in general out there, but getting to that point when all of the U.S. manufacturers now have plans in place around electric vehicles. That makes it much easier from a personal decision. And now there's also, this concept of a prosumer, and how does the market really serve that individual? And as they make that choice on the electric vehicle, how do we make it easy for them in how they're going to power it at their homes? How do you Uberize that experience, if you will, of buying an electric car and now having the right electrical power and the right setup in your home? Microgrids, because if you're buying an electric vehicle personally or in an organization, the concept of really powering it through maybe a less efficient means is not really helping you fulfill that other element as well. So, we've always talked about this concept of the triple bottom line, people, planet, profit for companies. In Schneider, we often call it the dual mandate, profits and purpose. But those things can really, that kind of a concept is really coming to life now with where technology is, both in our personal and our professional lives. So making some of these decisions, and profit now is able to be in a place where you can make that decision between profit and purpose, between profit and planet. And that's kind of cool to have these additional choices to make as we go.
Yeah, really great tips there. And I think it's interesting that you brought it back to the microgrid, kind of developing your own personal microgrid in a sense. And I think we're getting closer to that point. I mean, obviously, we talked about the fact that, you can get solar on your house, but you're still connected to the main grid. But bringing these things like house batteries are becoming more prevalent and more accessible in a sense. And I think you have a good point. As the technology grows, it makes it easier for us to do these things. And right now, it's a very conscious decision to do some of these things and think about them, because they're so ingrained in our behavior. So it'd be interesting to see how the technology develops, and how it switches our mindsets and our behaviors, and how we kind of just subconsciously make the better decision in a sense when it comes to sustainability and being able to do that and as a whole come together and be able to make these things work and last a whole lot longer, right? So that would be a great thing. And it is very interesting to hear about all these different things. And like I said a couple of times, this topic is, there's so many different avenues of this topic, I think, but it is really great to hear about these microgrids. And I think this is something that's very feasible for us in the warehousing industry and something that's really going to take off and start to pop up. I think that it makes total sense, and I think you had a lot of great points from a business standpoint as well, that predictability, controlling your costs a little more, having a little more visibility, and also the resiliency is a huge thing. I know I've certainly, worked in warehouses, and you lose power, and it could throw you off for more than just a day. Depending on how long it's out, it can be a mess. So, being able to kind of control that in your own sense is a huge benefit to that, as well as the sustainable part too. So, Jana, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and giving us all this great information. I know I learned a lot today. I hope the listener learned a lot too as well. And there's certainly so much more, I'm sure, on this topic that we could cover. We'll do that in the future. If people want to learn more about these topics and learn more about Schneider Electric, how can they do that?
Yeah, so our SchneiderElectric.com website is a great place to go, and there's areas around sustainability as well as the microgrid solutions as well. Or always reach out to me on LinkedIn under Jana Gerber, and I'd be happy to direct you in the right way as well.
All right, great. And we'll put all the information at thenewwarehouse.com as well. So, Jana, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.